Hi all and welcome to another session of biology. In previous session we were discussing one of the main event in life process, that is nutrition. Nutrition is uptake of nutrient and utilization of it to obtain energy. We saw two types of nutrition, autotrophic and heterotrophic. Autotrophic is when organisms produce their own food. Example we saw of that of plants. Plants perform photosynthesis, and second type of nutrition was heterotrophic. We saw holozoic mode of nutrition, example amoeba and human beings. So for every special process in our body, we have a separate system, and the first system that we saw was in plants, that is they take in sunlight, and this sunlight is trapped by the chlorophyll present in the leaf. They utilize water and carbon dioxide. Water is taken up through root hair cells and carbon dioxide through stomata. And this will be utilized to produce the food, and meanwhile there is liberation of oxygen. Oxygen is given out, whereas the glucose food produced will be stored and it is transported as sucrose and stored as starch. Then we saw heterotrophic nutrition in humans, where digestion begins from mouth. There is mechanical digestion where food is broken down into the simplest form. And then there is an enzyme salivary amylase which begins the digestion of carbohydrates. From mouth it goes to pharynx. From pharynx it goes to esophagus. Esophagus will show peristaltic movement. There is no digestion process which occurs in esophagus due to absence of enzymes. Then comes the stomach. Stomach is acidic in nature due to presence of concentrated HCl. This acidic nature is important for activation and functioning of enzyme pepsin. Pepsin is needed for digestion of protein. Now, concentrated HCl is dangerous for our cells because it can kill them. The cell releases, the cells present in the wall of the stomach release a thick layer of mucus which prevents the direct contact of HCl with that of a cell. Next, we saw small intestine. It receives secretions from liver, that is bile, secretions from pancreas, that is pancreatic juice, and also intestinal juice. Here it is the site of complete digestion as well as absorption. Carbohydrates are broken down into simpler forms, that is glucose. Protein is broken down to give amino acids, and fats are digested, or lipids are digested to give fatty acids and glycerol. Once the absorption occurs through villi and microvilli, the undigested and unabsorbed food will go to large intestine, where the majority of water content will be absorbed into the system, and from here on undigested food will be little thicker and it will be temporarily stored in rectum and finally ejected out through anus, known as defecation process. In today's topic we will be seeing the second type of or second life process event that is important in all the living organisms, that is respiration. Respiration can be thought as the opposite process of photosynthesis, because in photosynthesis oxygen is released and carbon dioxide is consumed, whereas in respiration oxygen is consumed and carbon dioxide is released. And end main product in photosynthesis is glucose, which is synthesized. In respiration it is the glucose which is broken down. So respiration reaction, as you can see here, it is sugar plus oxygen will result in end product carbon dioxide, water and energy. So glucose is the sugar that we are talking about here. To break down one glucose molecule, we need 6 oxygen molecule, and after breakdown we will get 6 carbon dioxide, 6 H2O and the ATP. So ATP we will get around 36 to 38 ATP. The energy released is stored as ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate, the energy currency of our cell. The respiration needs supply of oxygen. So this oxygen is taken in through the specialized structures in both plants and animals. So you might not think that plants don't need oxygen, because we generally tell plants take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. But no, oxygen is required by plants also for respiration process, but the amount of oxygen required by these organisms is way less compared to humans or any animal for that matter. Now if we see respiration, here we are talking about cellular respiration. So we generally tend to confuse the term respiration with that of breathing. Breathing is a physiological process wherein our respiratory system takes in oxygen and gives out carbon dioxide. Whereas respiration, when we tell, it is a biochemical process. It is a cellular process which occurs inside the body, that is the breakdown of glucose. So cellular respiration is a catabolic reaction wherein glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen, or in some organism it can be in absence of oxygen, to give out energy. So first, the main raw material or the main substrate here will be glucose. Glucose, we know, is a 6-carbon compound, that is C6H12O6. This 6-carbon compound is broken down into a 3-carbon compound, that is pyruvate. So this is 6-carbon. As you can see here, we have 6 carbons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. It is broken down to release or give 3-carbon molecule, that is pyruvate. So 1 glucose can give you 2 pyruvate, and this reaction occurs in cytoplasm. So every organism we know, whether it is a bacteria or amoeba or humans, we all have cytoplasm. So every organism will definitely show this basic reaction. This is known as glycolysis. What does glycolysis mean? Lysis is breakdown, glyco is glucose. So this is the breakdown of glucose, and this is a common pathway in both type of respiration, that is aerobic and anaerobic respiration. What does aerobic respiration mean? It occurs in the presence of oxygen, whereas anaerobic occurs in absence of oxygen. Aerobic respiration needs a supply of oxygen for complete breakdown of glucose, whereas anaerobic is incomplete breakdown of glucose. We will see the differences shortly. Now once the glucose is broken down to release pyruvate, the pyruvate can follow 3 pathways. That is, it can choose either one of them depending on which organism the pyruvate is found in. So if you take first path, so pyruvate can take up the aerobic respiration path, which is seen in majority all the animals and majority of plants. So here we have presence of oxygen. This step occurs in the mitochondria. We know that in previous classes we have learnt mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell because it produces ATP. How does it produce ATP? Is by utilizing pyruvate. So pyruvate will enter the mitochondria, and pyruvate is completely broken down to give carbon dioxide, water and energy. How much energy can it produce? It can produce on average 36 to 38 ATPs. This is the common pathway seen in all the aerobically respiring organisms. Second path is anaerobic respiration. In anaerobic respiration, again there are 2 pathways. First is in humans, in our cells, especially in muscle cells, we can see during less supply of oxygen. When does this occur? Is when we are doing very strenuous exercise, or we are the muscle cells are working beyond our normal capacity. So for muscles to work or any cell to work, we need supply of oxygen and glucose. But when we are working too much, the muscle cells will get depleted, or they receive less amount of oxygen because rate of breathing cannot outpass the maximum amount. Rate of breathing can only supply a minimum quantity or limited amount of oxygen to muscles. So when there is less supply of oxygen, muscles will shift from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration. Here what happens is pyruvate is broken down but incomplete breakdown to release a byproduct also, that is lactic acid, and energy is released, of course. And here if you see, carbon dioxide and water are not formed. So 2 pyruvate, if I take 2 pyruvate will give me 2 lactic acids. That means 1 pyruvate gives 1 lactic acid. Whereas in mitochondrial aerobic respiration we get 6 carbon dioxide and 6 water. Now here energy is released, but it is not like aerobic respiration. It is not the amount of energy that you expect. It gives approximately 2 ATPs only. Now what happens when muscles are supplied with enough oxygen after some time? This lactic acid will be broken down completely to release carbon dioxide, water. Now this lactic acid accumulation can cause certain effects in our cell. That is, due to accumulation of this lactic acid in muscle cell, we can have fatigue in the muscle cell, or we can call it as muscle catch. Okay, so when lactic acid is accumulated, that is when we get pain in our muscle cells. Once you supply oxygen to the muscle cell, the lactic acid can be converted to carbon dioxide and water. So how do we increase this oxygen supply to muscle is when you supplied with heat. So that is why when you have the muscle pain, hot water bags are recommended, so that heat energy stimulates blood flow to that particular region and lactic acid can be completely broken down. And the third main type of pathway that can be taken up by the pyruvate is the alcoholic fermentation. That is, this occurs in absence of oxygen in the yeast. So this is complete absence, whereas in muscle it was just lack of oxygen. What do these yeast cells do? Yeast belongs to fungi group. Here it produces ethanol. So 2 pyruvate gives me 2 ethanol and 2 carbon dioxide and energy. Energy is again less, that is around 2 ATPs. So why is this important? This is used in both bakery and brewery industry. Ethanol will be used as a main product in brewery industry. Carbon dioxide is used in bakery industry so that the dough becomes fluffy or soft. Now all of this occurs in different places. That is, if you see, the aerobic respiration occurs in mitochondria, whereas these two anaerobic reactions. So these two are anaerobic respiration. This occurs in cytoplasm. And in cytoplasm, the breakdown occurs and ethanol is released in case of yeast and lactic acid is released in case of the muscle cells. So what is the main differences between aerobic and anaerobic? So first difference is in aerobic it is complete breakdown of glucose. In anaerobic it is incomplete. Second is aerobic needs oxygen, anaerobic doesn't need. Third difference is amount of energy released. Aerobic releases more energy compared to anaerobic. Anaerobic is 2 ATP, aerobic is 36 to 38 ATPs. Next, fourth difference is the place where the reactions occur. Aerobic respiration occurs in cytoplasm and mitochondria, whereas anaerobic respiration occurs only in cytoplasm. And this anaerobic reaction can also be termed by another name, that is fermentation. Depending on what is the end product of the fermentation. Fermentation is of two types. One is the lactic acid fermentation seen in our muscle cell. Other is the ethanol or alcohol fermentation seen in yeast cell. So these are the main differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now, coming to the activity to show that carbon dioxide is present in the exhaled air from our lungs. So what we can do is we can take lime water either in a test tube or in a conical flask, and we blow the air through a straw or a tube so that the exhaled air touches the lime water. So slowly what you will see is as and when we blow the air, the lime water turns milky, which suggests presence of carbon dioxide. Coming to respiration in plants. Here respiration means, here we are talking about gaseous exchange. Respiration, cellular respiration is common in all the organisms. How does plants take up the gases required for respiration? They have specialized structures for every organ they have. For example, leaf. In leaf, they have the pores known as stomatal pores, which help in gaseous exchange. So when they are respiring, they will take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. So this occurs mainly during night, because during night photosynthesis is not occurring. So oxygen cannot be released during photosynthesis. So during night, plants are also respiring. Or we can tell plants are respiring throughout the day. That is 24 hours they will respire. Only thing is during night it is more evident because of absence of photosynthesis. So that is why it is recommended not to sleep under trees during night, because they are also consuming oxygen. So there will be competition for oxygen between the tree and us. So obviously the trees will take up more oxygen, so that is when we suffocate. So plants also respire throughout the day and night. The photosynthesis occurs during day so that oxygen liberated can be used up for respiration. Second structure is root. In root they have root hair cells. They help in uptake of oxygen through minor holes. There are air spaces in the soil, between the soil particles, which will have the oxygen which is taken up by the root hair. So that is why it is necessary not to flood the water, plant with water. So if you pour excess water, the air spaces will be blocked. So the respiration of the root hair cells will stop. So roots will not be able to respire and slowly the plant will die. Third structure is lenticels. You can see certain pores present on the bark of the tree, something like this. So these are the holes. This hole is the lenticel, through which the stem can take up the oxygen needed for the respiration and give out CO2. Lenticels are seen in old stem of the plant, not in the herbaceous stem. Now coming to respiration or exchange of gas in different organisms. Here we have taken example of amoeba. Amoeba is a unicellular organism. So exchange of gas can occur merely through simple diffusion. So outer environment is rich in oxygen compared to inner side or inner environment of the amoeba. So mere diffusion will help in uptake of oxygen. Similarly, inside the cell there is higher amount of carbon dioxide compared to outside. So because of concentration difference, the carbon dioxide can go out of the amoeba. Amoeba is simple, so diffusion pressure is enough to meet the oxygen demand. But as the animal group or animal kingdom, body design will transform from simple to complex. The mere diffusion pressure is not enough, because here if you see, for diffusion to occur, the two medium, that is the inner cellular contents and the outer environment, are in direct contact. But if you take humans, all my cells are not in direct contact with the outer environment. So if I take liver cell, that also needs oxygen, but it is not in direct contact with atmosphere to take oxygen. So how will we supply the oxygen to the lungs? So that is through transportation. So who will give the transporting system oxygen is the respiratory system. So respiratory system takes oxygen from the outer environment into the body. From the lungs, that is inside the body, from lungs it is taken to liver through the circulatory system, that is the blood. Now let's see the second organism in which how the exchange of gases occur, that is the earthworm. In earthworm, the skin, the outermost skin has the moist layer, known as cuticle, which helps in exchange of gases by diffusion again. Next is the insects, wherein they have spiracles to take in the oxygen and tracheal system to transport the oxygen-rich air. Next comes fishes. Fishes take in dissolved oxygen present in water through the gills. So the gills will take up the oxygen dissolved in it and they will supply it to all parts of the body. Coming to next organism, that is the frog. So frogs are amphibians. Their primary respiratory organ is lungs, through which they take in oxygen-rich air, whereas they have secondary respiratory surface also, that is the moist skin, through which they can take up the oxygen through diffusion. Next comes our other organisms. Example here is snake, is a reptile. This has respiratory system. You can see here left lung and right lung. They have the respiratory system. Similarly, birds also have lungs for taking up of oxygen-rich air. And last is mammals. We have the most advanced respiratory system to take in oxygen-rich air and give out carbon dioxide-rich air. Now we will see the main respiratory organs and how the respiratory system in human works. So first, if you see the air that we inhale is oxygen-rich air. We should not tell we are inhaling oxygen. Inhaling pure oxygen is also dangerous. So when we inhale, we are inhaling oxygen-rich air. The air contains other gases also. So when we inhale, the air passes through nostrils. From nostrils, it goes to the pharynx. So in nostrils, we have hair-like structures and mucus-secreting cells which trap the dust and pathogens which enter and make sure that air entering the respiratory tract is devoid of such waste materials. In pharynx, if you see, pharynx we saw in digestive system also, wherein it makes sure that air and food goes to specific passages only. When we are inhaling the air or exhaling the air, the epiglottis is open so that air can enter. But when we are swallowing, the epiglottis closes the airway so that food goes into the food pipe. From pharynx, it goes to the next organ, that is the larynx. So larynx is the sound box in our body which generates the sound. So sound is produced only when we talk during exhalation process. So if you observe carefully, when I am inhaling air, I will not be able to speak. Only during exhalation process, the larynx will be able to produce sound. So we have nostrils which prevent passage of dust and the pathogens into the system. Then we have the pharynx, common duct for both air and food. Then we have the larynx. So larynx, there is a cartilaginous structure in males which protrude once they reach the puberty. This is known as Adam's apple. This can be seen in some and some may not have it. So it depends on their body design. So once the air passes through larynx, it goes to the trachea. In trachea, if you see carefully, there are ring-like structures. So these are C-shaped cartilaginous rings which prevent collapsing of trachea during inhalation or exhalation. Because during inhalation and exhalation, air is pushed through the trachea with pressure. So, and tracheal wall, if you see, it is made up of the very delicate epithelial cells. So, because of the pressure, there is chance that this trachea might collapse. The epithelial cells can collapse due to pressure. So, to prevent that, we have C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Once the trachea reaches near to the lungs, it branches out to give rise to the primary bronchi. Then they enter the lungs left and right, and the bronchi will further branch into secondary and tertiary bronchi and finally into bronchioles. If we see the lungs especially, they are very delicate structure and they are protected by the bony structure that is the rib cage. The rib cage is made up of 12 pairs of ribs and they are attached to backbone on the backside, so this backside, and in the front they are attached to the breastbone, that is the sternum. So if you observe carefully, the between ribs you will have the muscles which help in breathing mechanism. These muscles are known as intercostal muscles, and these are required for movement of rib cage during inhalation and exhalation. Now, these ribs are in 12 pairs, whereas the last 2 pairs, if you observe here carefully, they are not attached to the cage on one end. They are only attached to backbone, so and they are protecting the kidneys. Now, the internally, even though there is rib cage, internally also lungs need a delicate membranous protection, because lungs, if they hit the rib cage by chance also, it can hurt the damage the surfaces. So both the lungs are surrounded by a membranous structure called pleural membranes. There are 2 membranes, outer pleural membrane and inner pleural membrane. The outer pleural membrane is known as parietal pleura and inner pleural membrane is visceral pleura. Between these 2 membranes there is a cavity, that is pleural cavity, filled with the fluid, pleural fluid. What will this do? This will prevent the lungs from getting damaged by mechanical shocks. And here if we see the right lung, this is the right lung and this is the left lung. In the left lung there is a small notch, that is a depression here, that is to accommodate the heart. So heart is located here near the left lung and it is slightly, the position is slightly shifted so that it can accommodate the place. Now coming to respiratory system, there are 2 zones in human respiratory system. One is the conducting zone, the second is the respiratory zone. In the conducting zone, you will not see exchange of gas, that is, it is just mere transportation of oxygen rich air. In respiratory zone, you will see the exchange of gases. Conducting zone includes the nostrils, the pharynx, larynx, trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi and bronchioles. So it starts with nostrils to bronchioles will be conducting zone. Next comes the respiratory zone, which will start after the bronchioles, that is the alveolar duct. So this is the alveolar duct and this is the alveoli. And if you see, alveoli is the one which is richly supplied with blood vessels, both artery veins and also the capillary. Now gaseous exchange occurs in the alveoli. Alveoli is also known as miniature lung because exchange of gas occurs in this structure. So here we will see pulmonary vein and pulmonary artery. So vein is the one which is carrying the blood towards the lungs, and artery is carrying blood away from the heart. So artery here will be carrying deoxygenated blood. So this is the pulmonary artery which is carrying deoxygenated blood towards the lung, and it gets oxygenated. That is, carbon dioxide is given into the lungs and it takes up oxygen, and the pulmonary vein will carry the oxygenated blood. Now if we see carefully, the capillaries are the site of gaseous exchange because their wall is made up of single cell thick layer. So oxygen can easily diffuse into the cell and carbon dioxide can easily diffuse out. Here the diffusion membrane consists of three things only. One is the alveolar membrane, that is this one. If you see, alveolar membrane is also made up of single cell layer, and the capillary is also made up of single cell layer, and between these two alveoli we have the connective tissue, areolar tissue. So only the membranes, this is so thin that it can allow diffusion of carbon dioxide out of the capillary into alveoli and diffusion of oxygen into the capillary. Once the carbon dioxide is released into alveoli, it will be taken out of the alveoli through the same path that the air got into the alveoli. That is, it goes to alveolar duct, bronchioles, and all the bronchi, trachea, larynx, pharynx, and nostrils. Whereas the oxygen that is taken up will be going to the heart, where it will be pumped towards other body parts which require the oxygen. Now if you see the complete pathway, it starts with nose, nostrils, then goes to common path, that is pharynx. From pharynx it goes to the larynx, the sound box. Then it goes to trachea, bronchi, primary, secondary and tertiaries, then bronchioles, alveolar duct and alveoli. Now if we see the breathing mechanism, how does rib cage help in breathing? Apart from rib cage, we also have a muscular structure which helps in the breathing, that is the diaphragm. So this is how a typical inhalation and exhalation process looks. So you can see the diaphragm will go up and down, which will increase the volume and decrease the volume present inside the lung cavity. So when the volume decreases, the pressure increases, and thus the air can go out of the body. So let's see this one step at a time. So here two systems work at a time, that is, one is the diaphragm, which has to go become dome shaped and flat. Second is the ribs and intercostal muscles present, which has to take the ribs outwards and upwards, or it has to bring back downwards and inwards. So it will go upward and outward during the during inhalation process, and ribcage go downwards and inwards during exhalation. So first process that we see is inhalation. So major activities or steps that we see here is during inhalation, the diaphragm moves down as the muscles contract. So this will allow the pulmonary cavity to extend, the volume increases, and ribs move outward and upward, and the muscles, the intercostal muscles, will contract. So this will increase the volume and decrease the pressure. Due to decrease in pressure, the oxygen rich air will enter through the nostrils. Whereas opposite occurs during exhalation. That is, when air has to go out, the diaphragm moves up as the muscle relaxes. It makes it a dome-shaped structure. And simultaneously, ribs move downward and inward, and the muscles will relax. This will make the cavity, pulmonary cavity, to become less. The volume decreases, so pressure increases. So the air, which is rich in carbon dioxide will be exhaled out. So major differences in inhalation and exhalation, that is the position and the muscles work in diaphragm and ribs and intercostal muscles. Now let's see some of the questions. So first question, the breakdown of pyruvate into carbon dioxide, water and energy takes place in, options are cytoplasm, mitochondria, chloroplast, nucleus. So here pyruvate is broken down completely to CO2, water and energy. So it is aerobic respiration. This step occurs in the mitochondria. Whereas the first step, glucose to pyruvate, occurs in the cytoplasm. Next question, how does gaseous exchange happen in amoeba? Options are osmosis, active transport, diffusion, pseudopodia. Amoeba we know is a unicellular organism, and the gaseous exchange, that is oxygen should get in and carbon dioxide should go out. This is a process of simple exchange because the body is in direct contact with the outer environment. So this is an example of diffusion. Next question, the correct sequence of anaerobic respiration in yeast is, options are A, glucose to pyruvate to ethanol and carbon dioxide. The site are cytoplasm and mitochondria respectively. Second, glucose to pyruvate and then lactic acid, site are cytoplasm. Third, glucose to pyruvate then to lactic acid, site is cytoplasm and mitochondria respectively. Fourth option, glucose to pyruvate then ethanol and carbon dioxide, site is cytoplasm only. So here they are asking of anaerobic respiration in yeast. Yeast we know that is a fungi which is used in both bakery and brewery. So they have to produce ethanol and CO2. So this occurs only in cytoplasm. So the correct answer will be, so ethanol and carbon dioxide and energy. So option is D. Next question, yeast is added to grape juice and is preserved for a long time to prepare wine. This process is, options are anaerobic respiration, aerobic respiration, pasteurization, emulsification. So this is where glucose is converted to ethanol. Along with ethanol, CO2 and energy, that is ATP, is produced. This occurs in lack or absence of oxygen, hence it is anaerobic respiration. Another name is alcoholic fermentation. Pasteurization is where the milk is heated and cooled down very rapidly to make sure that bacteria or microbes are killed, so milk can be preserved for longer duration. Emulsification we saw in nutrition chapter, where the fats are emulsified so that the fat digesting enzymes can act on it. Next question, the following statements is or are correct about life process in organism. Option 1, the breaking down of pyruvate into CO2, water and energy takes place in mitochondria. Second, in yeast, fermentation takes place in the presence of oxygen. 3, breaking down of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in chloroplast. 4, the release of energy in aerobic process is greater than the anaerobic respiration. So if you see which statements are true. So first statement says pyruvate is broken down completely in mitochondria, which is a true statement. Second, yeast fermentation occurs in presence of oxygen. This is false because it is a anaerobic respiration. Third statement or third option, breakdown of pyruvate is using oxygen takes place in chloroplast, which is again false because it occurs in mitochondria. Fourth option, the release of energy in aerobic process is greater than anaerobic. This is a true statement, because aerobic produces 36 to 38 ATP, anaerobic produces only 2 ATPs. Next question, examine the following statements and select the correct option. Statement 1 is massive amount of gaseous exchange take place in the leaves through stomata. Statement 2, exchange of gases also occurs across the surface of stem, root and leaves of the plant. So options are A is true, B is false, A is false, B is true. Both A and B are true, both A and B are false. So massive amount of gaseous exchange occurs in leaves through stomata is true, because stomata is the opening pore which can allow gaseous exchange, and it is open throughout the day. Statement 2 is also true, because the plant body will, each and every organ in plant body will meet its own oxygen demand. Stems have lenticels, root have root hair cell, and leaves have the stomatal pore. So this is also a true statement. So correct answer will be option C. Next question is, rate of respiration is much higher in aquatic animals than others. Why? So in aquatic animals, example fishes, we saw that they take in oxygen dissolved in water, and we know oxygen present in water is way lesser compared to oxygen or amount of oxygen present in the air. So concentration of dissolved oxygen in water is much lesser than the concentration of atmospheric oxygen. So in order to meet the oxygen demand in their body, they have a higher rate of breathing compared to a terrestrial organism. Now let's summarize the topic. Now let's see the next topic, that is transportation in plants. Transportation is an essential process so that the substance that is taken in from one part of the body can be used up in other part. So if there is lack of transportation, then the parts that it needs the substance will never get it. So in plants, for transporting we have two systems, that is, one is water conducting system and the one is food conducting system. So this is done with the help of a tissue, that is vascular tissue. Here we have xylem to conduct water and minerals, and phloem to transport photosynthetic product, that is the glucose. So first is transport of water, which occurs with the help of the pressure, that is transpiration pull. First step is absorption of water from the root hair cells. So root hair cells will take up the water from the soil through the process of osmosis. Once it goes to root hair cell, from there it will go to root xylem. So this is the only because of the positive force that the water is getting transported. From there the water will reach the next point, that is the stem. So if you take the absorption occurred here, then because of concentration difference it goes to the cortex cells, and from there it goes to the root xylem. So here through transportation it goes to root xylem. So here you can see root xylem is transporting water in upward direction only, that is unidirectional movement. So once it reaches the root xylem, after that the pressure is created in the leaf. So here the leaf loses water due to transpirational pull. So water has to be taken from the previous part, that is the stem. Now stem has lost the water, so stem will take it from the root. So here we have two pressures, one is the root pressure, one is the transpirational pull. So water enters root hair through osmosis, then root pressure pushes water upward through root xylem into the stem. After that the transpirational pull will pull the water up till the leaf. Now coming to the summarizing the transportation of water. Transpiration helps in absorption and upward movement of water and minerals dissolved in it from roots to the leaves. It also helps in temperature regulation because water loss will cool down the plant body. The effect of root pressure in transport of water is more important at night when the transpirational pull force will not be seen. During day, when the stomata is open, the transpiration pull becomes the major driving force in the movement of water in xylem. Now coming to transport of food, which is a bidirectional process which is seen in phloem. Even though phloem is the one which is transporting the food, it also needs help of xylem. So here if we see, this is the leaf, the source cell. So here the cell synthesizes glucose, but glucose cannot be stored as it is because it increases the osmotic pressure. So it has to be stored in another form, that is starch. So storage organ is far away from the source organ. So here we can take example of root. Example is sweet potato. So how is it transported? Again, it can't be transported of glucose because of it increases the concentration of the solution. So glucose is first converted to sucrose, and sucrose will enter the phloem. Once the sucrose enters, the phloem will take up water from the xylem. Now the transportation will occur along the concentration gradient, that is from high concentration to low, that is the sink cell. Here again the starch will be the sucrose is converted to a storage form, that is the starch. And once the starch or sucrose is gone out of the phloem, the water will go back to xylem and the cycle continues until the excess glucose is stored as starch. Now let's see certain questions related to transportation in plants. First, transportation of food in plants is known as option A, ascent of sap, translocation, transpiration, photosynthesis. Transportation of food in plants is known as translocation, which occurs in phloem. Food, that is the photosynthetic product, is transported from source to sink. Next, similarity between xylem and phloem is options are unidirectional, bidirectional, conducting units, protective in function. So the similarity between these two are both are considered as conducting unit because one conducts water, the other conducts food. Xylem is the unidirectionally conducting tissue and phloem is the bidirectional. Protection will be given mainly by the epidermis, and xylem helps in mechanical stiffness. So if you summarize today's topic, first we saw the cellular respiration, that is aerobic and anaerobic differences and the reactions. Aerobic will generate more energy compared to anaerobic type of reaction. In respiratory system, we saw how the inhalation and exhalation process helps in intake of oxygen rich air and exhalation of carbon dioxide rich air. We also saw in plants also we see certain organs wherein exchange of gases are seen. Example, stomata in leaves, lenticels in stem and root hair cells in root. We saw how transportation occurs in xylem and phloem. So today we have seen respiration and transportation in plants. So I'll meet you guys in next session. Until then, thank you.